My name is Claire Harper. I'm 27 years old, a marketing analyst living just outside Denver. 3 weeks after my father died, I got a call that shattered whatever peace I had left. It was my stepmother, Monica. Her voice was cold, smug. "I sold the house," she said. "You didn't deserve it anyway." That house wasn't just wood and walls. It was my childhood, my father's legacy. And she sold it like it was hers to give away. But what she didn't know was that my dad had already made sure she couldn't touch it. Before we get into how everything unraveled, let me know in the comments if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. And hit subscribe if you believe some secrets are best revealed after the damage is done. I was sitting at my kitchen table in the quiet suburbs of Denver when the phone rang. It was a number I recognized immediately, though I hadn't saved it. Monica. My stepmother. My stomach nodded. She hadn't called once since my dad's funeral 3 weeks ago, and that silence had been a small blessing. But now, out of nowhere, she was calling. I hesitated, then picked up. "I sold your house," she said. Just like that. No greeting. No hesitation. Her voice was soaked in triumph, like she'd waited her whole life to say it. "Excuse me?" I asked, my hand gripping the phone tighter. "Your father's house." "We now sold it to a lovely couple. Cash offer. They move in next week." She laughed lightly, like she had just handed me a life lesson wrapped in a knife. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. That house. The Victorian on Elmwood Street. Blue shutters, ivy creeping up the porch columns, a worn swing that groaned like an old friend. It was my childhood, my sanctuary, my dad's pride and joy. He built a life in that house after my mom left. And now, it was gone. But only for a moment. Because just last month, when the weight of his illness had become impossible to ignore, my father had asked me to meet with his lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. It had been a quiet, strange meeting. Just the two of us in a wood-paneled office that smelled like old paper and stronger coffee. "Your father wanted to make sure you had this," Mr. Reynolds had said, handing me a sealed envelope and a legal document with my name printed across the top. It was a deed. Quit-claim transfer. The house had been signed over to me 6 months before Dad died. I hadn't told anyone, not even my closest friends. I wasn't ready for that weight. Not yet. So as Monica droned on over the phone, bragging about the kitchen renovations she was sure the new owners would make, I listened in silence. And then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "Good luck with that." Hung up. The room fell silent again, but this time it buzzed with something different. Not grief. Not confusion. Something sharper. I reached for the envelope Dad had given me, still sealed, still sitting on my desk drawer. My fingers brushed over the handwriting. His handwriting. Neat, deliberate. I knew what I had to do next. Not just for the house. Not even for me. For him. For what he tried to protect. For everything she thought she could steal. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan as it made lazy circles above me, shadows sliding across the walls like whispers. Every creak of the floor outside my bedroom made me flinch. Not because I was afraid, because I was remembering. Remembering the way Dad used to peek in to say goodnight. The way his slippers shuffled down the hall when he went to refill his tea. The sound of the swing groaning outside the window when the wind picked up just right. Those sounds didn't exist in my apartment in Denver. This place was too new, too clean, too far from the echo of anything real. Elmwood Street was the only place where things made sense. And Monica had touched it, sold it, paraded strangers through it like it was nothing more than a listing number on a realtor's page. I finally got out of bed around 4 a.m., brewed stale coffee, and sat on the floor of my living room with the deed and Dad's letter spread out in front of me like puzzle pieces. My legs were numb. My heart was on fire. She thought she'd won. And I needed to let her think that. Just a little longer. Marcus had been clear. If Monica believed she still had power, she'd act more recklessly. Every decision she made, every move she took, would build the case against her. And I had to be careful not to get in the way of that. So the next morning, I did exactly what I didn't want to do. I texted her. Just 2 words. Thank you. No context. No punctuation. No emotion. It didn't take long for her to respond. You're welcome. Maybe now you'll learn what humility feels like. I stared at the message, feeling the rage surge and then retreat into something colder. This wasn't just a woman trying to punish me. This was someone who had wanted the house for herself for a very long time. And now she thought she had it. I drove to Elmwood that afternoon. I didn't go up to the house. Not yet. I parked across the street, just beyond the row of sycamore trees that lined the block, and watched. There was a sleek white SUV in the driveway. Monica's, of course. The windows on the front of the house were open. Inside, someone moved past the curtain, probably a stager or a cleaner. And on the lawn, I saw it. The sign. Coming soon. She had already put it on the market. My jaw tightened. I snapped a photo, then another, then one more with a street number in the frame. Documentation. Everything mattered now. Dad's advice repeated in my head like a quiet rhythm. Be strategic. So I waited. I gave it 3 days before I went back again. This time there were 2 cars in the driveway. Both unfamiliar. A couple stood on the porch, talking to a realtor with a clipboard and bright, artificial enthusiasm. I watched as they were led inside. My house. My father's house. My childhood in their shoes. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then I called Marcus. She's showing it, I said, voice flat. Has she listed it yet? The sign says, coming soon. But there are buyers inside. Take photos. Video if you can. The more evidence we gather, the better. How far can she take this before we act? As far as we let her, he replied. And for now, the more she thinks she's in control, the deeper she digs herself. Hung up. And waited some more. That Friday, I packed a few things from my apartment and moved in with Sarah. Sarah and I had been best friends since high school. She knew my dad, she knew what that house meant to me. And she had offered her spare bedroom without hesitation when the grief got too heavy. Now she offered it again, for safety. You really want to watch her do this? She asked as I wheeled my suitcase into the room. I need to, I answered. She's selling things, holding open houses. If we step in too soon, she'll twist the story. Say Dad wasn't thinking clearly. Say I manipulated him. But the more she does now, the less ground she has later. And what if she crosses a line you can't undo? Thought about that. Then opened my laptop and pulled up the real estate listing. And there it was. A house. Priced at nearly double its market value. The photos were painful. Cold, whitewashed versions of every room I once loved. Gone were the photos of me and Dad fishing at Lake Michigan. Gone were the warm bookshelves filled with his favorite novels. Gone was the leather chair in the den where he spent his final weeks reading the newspaper and sipping weak tea with honey. I stared at that screen until Sarah gently pulled it away from me. We'll get it back, she whispered. I didn't answer. Because part of me knew we already had it. She just didn't know yet. The next week, I returned to the house during the 2-hour window Monica had so generously allowed me. She watched from the doorway with her arms crossed as I entered my childhood bedroom. It didn't even smell the same anymore. You have 20 minutes, she said. I have a showing scheduled. Of course, I replied, not looking at her. Packed photo albums. A small wooden box of keepsakes. The quilt Grandma made before she passed away. Small things that mattered more than anything she could sell. As I carried the box down the hallway, I noticed something missing from the corner of the den. Dad's chair. Where's the recliner? I asked quietly. Monica didn't even flinch. Donated. It was old and ugly. My stomach twisted. And the books. Some guy from the university bought them. I got $800 for the whole set. Dad's first editions. His annotated Steinbeck. His signed copy of Farewell to Arms. Irreplaceable. Gone. I nodded, the knot in my throat refusing to loosen. As I passed through the kitchen, I noticed the pantry shelves stripped bare, replaced with useless decorative jars. The window seat in the living room, where Dad and I used to read, Had a tray with fake lemons and catalog magazines. I walked to the car. Monica followed, leaning against her SUV like she was proud of something. "Finally accepting it?" she asked, smirking. "Just getting organized," I said, opening the trunk. "I'm meeting with a buyer next week," she added. $50,000 above asking price. They want to gut the whole first floor. That paneling you two loved. It's going to be the first thing to go. I nodded, shutting the trunk. Then turned back to her with the same calm voice I had used on that first phone call. "Good luck with that." Her smile faltered for just a moment, and I got in the car. I didn't cry on the drive back to Sarah's. Not because I wasn't angry, but because I knew something she didn't. She was selling air. And she didn't even know it. The next morning, I woke to 3 missed calls from Monica. And a text. "By the way, I changed the locks. Neighborhood's getting rough. Safety first." I stared at the message, heart thudding in my chest. Changed the locks. On a house she didn't own. I called her immediately. She didn't answer. Voicemail picked up with that same sugary, performative voice she always used when she wanted people to believe she was a grieving widow. "You've reached Monica Mitchell. Please leave a message and I'll return your call shortly. Thank you and have a blessed day." I hung up without speaking and called Marcus. He picked up on the first ring. "She changed the locks," I said. "She's blocking me out of my own house." There was a pause on the other end. Then calmly, "We document it. We don't react. But my grandmother's jewelry box is still in there. And the last of Dad's old tools. She's locking me out and tearing the place apart." "I know," he said. "And I promise Claire we'll get every piece of it back or compensated. But if we force a confrontation now, we give her a way to twist it. She'll claim she didn't know, that you're confused, that the deed isn't real. Let her act. Then we bury her with the facts." I exhaled slowly. "Okay. What do you need from me?" "Timestamps, photos, written records. Every call, every message, every dollar's worth of property she touches without your permission. Build the paper trail. We're preparing for the fall." Fall. That's what it was now. Monica's fall. She just didn't see the edge coming. A week later she called me again. This time, all false sweetness and condescension. "I have a new buyer lined up. We're finalizing the paperwork by Monday," she said cheerfully. "They're paying in cash. 0 delays. Amazing couple. They love the bones of the place." "Congratulations," I replied evenly. "They'll be gutting it, of course. Open concept. Modern kitchen. Removing that awful wood paneling you and your dad were so obsessed with." I closed my eyes, picturing the den. That paneling wasn't just decoration. It had history. My grandfather had carved the corner moldings himself. He taught my dad to sand the beams there when he was 16. And one summer before college, Dad had taught me the same thing. Hand over hand, guiding me through the process of smoothing and staining every inch of it. It took us nearly 2 months, working weekends and evenings with music playing from a dusty old radio in the window. She was going to destroy it. Clenched my jaw. "Sounds like they have big plans," I said steady. "They do. I'll be using the money to buy a condo in Naples. Waterfront. Your father would have wanted me to enjoy what's left of my life." "I think he wanted a lot of things," I murmured. "Oh, Claire. Don't be bitter. Some of us were smart enough to know what mattered." She hung up, and I called Marcus again. "She says she's closing Monday. Papers signed. New owners ready to move in." He didn't sound surprised. "Perfect. Now we can move." Saturday morning, Marcus contacted the title company. By noon, the process had started. By that evening, Monica was blowing up my phone. First a call, then 3 more. Then text after text. "What have you done? The title company says there's an issue. Fix this now. If this is some trick, you'll regret it." I didn't respond. Instead, I sent everything to Marcus. He told me to hold the line. And that night, Monica showed up at Sarah's apartment, banging on the door, shouting my name. Sarah peeked through the peephole and motioned for me to stay quiet. We listened as Monica alternated between threats and syrupy concern. She even tried to guilt the neighbors, insisting I was unstable, grieving too hard, making things up. No one bought it. Eventually she left. But not before taping an envelope to the door. Inside was a handwritten letter. Blair, this is serious. You're going to destroy both our reputations. Stop whatever you're doing and call me. We can fix this together. Don't make a mistake you can't take back. Monica. I folded the letter and put it in my file. Evidence. Marcus scheduled the meeting for Monday. Everyone would be there. The Bradfords, the buyers. Their agent. Title company. Monica. Me. I spent Sunday preparing. Rehearsing what I would say. Choosing an outfit that was simple, strong, confident. Navy blazer, white blouse, flats that didn't try too hard. You own that house, Sarah reminded me. Walk in like you do. Monday morning, I arrived at Marcus's office 15 minutes early. The parking lot was already full. Monica's luxury SUV was parked across 2 spaces, as usual. The Bradford's sleek black SUV was there too. I took a deep breath, slipped on my sunglasses, and walked into the building like I wasn't breaking inside. Because I wasn't. I belonged there. In the conference room, the tension hit like a wave. Monica sat stiffly beside her real estate agent, Diane, who looked pale and nervous. Thomas and Emily Bradford sat across the table, whispering to each other. Their agent flipped through a folder, frowning. A woman from the title company stood near the end of the table, her expression unreadable. I walked to my seat beside Marcus and nodded. He cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming on short notice, he said. I'm Marcus Reynolds, legal representative for Claire Harper, who, as of 6 months ago, is the legal owner of the property at 362 Elmwood Street. He gestured to the title agent. Ms. Garcia. She opened her folder and slid a copy of the deed across the table. County records confirm a quitclaim transfer from Robert Harper to Claire Harper, filed and processed on the date shown. The seller listed, Monica Harper, is not the legal owner of the property. Monica exploded. This is absurd. That house was left to me. I have the will. She fished papers from her purse and shoved them across the table. Ms. Garcia reviewed them, nodded. The will does state that. However, the will was signed 3 years ago. The deed was transferred during Mr. Harper's lifetime. At the time of his death, he no longer legally owned the property to pass on. Monica turned red. He didn't know what he was doing. He was on medication. Claire manipulated him. Marcus calmly slid another document forward. This is a notarized statement from Dr. Bellman, his oncologist. He confirms that Mr. Harper was of sound mind and full awareness at the time of the transfer. We also have letters from his hospice nurse and 2 friends who visited regularly. All affirm his mental clarity. Thomas Bradford spoke up. Are you saying we were about to buy a house from someone who didn't even own it? Yes, Marcus said plainly. Any sale would be fraudulent. Emily Bradford looked furious. We put down $20,000. We gave notice at our current home. We're supposed to move next week. Monica started to sputter. Ms. Garcia interjected. Your deposit is fully refundable. Given the misrepresentation, you may also be entitled to damages. Diane, the real estate agent, shrank in her seat. Patricia assured me. Did you do a title check? Marcus asked. She said the will was enough, Diane whispered. Jeffrey, the Bradford's agent, stared at her in disbelief. That's real estate 101. Monica stood suddenly. I want my attorney here. That's your right, Marcus replied. But nothing will change the facts. The room was silent for a moment. Then Emily Bradford rose. We expect full restitution by end of business today, she said. And we may pursue legal action. As she and her husband collected their things and left, Monica sat back down, looking like someone who had just been shoved off a cliff. This is not over, she said, voice shaking. Actually, Marcus replied, it is. And for the first time in months I believed him. The morning after the confrontation at Marcus's office, I stood in front of the house on Elmwood Street with Sarah by my side. 2 off-duty police officers stood quietly behind us, arms crossed. They're not to intimidate but to witness. Marcus had arranged everything. After what happened in the meeting, there was no more room for pretending. Patricia, no, I had stopped calling her Monica, had 48 hours to vacate the property. That was generous, considering she'd had 3 months to start packing. But now the clock was ticking, and I was here to make sure every second counted. Her white SUV was in the driveway, but the front door was closed. The blinds in the living room were drawn, and the porch light was still on even though the sun was rising. Boxes were stacked on the front steps, wrapped in tape and labeled in a rushed, jagged scrawl. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, firmer this time. The door creaked open. Patricia stood there, her hair disheveled, dark circles painted beneath her eyes, the mask she'd worn for years now completely stripped away. I need more time, she said hoarsely before I could speak. 48 hours isn't enough. 5 years of marriage. There's too much to go through. I stared at her, unmoved. You had 3 months. You spent them selling everything that didn't belong to you. She opened the door wider, allowing me inside with an air of reluctant defeat. The house was chaos. Half-packed boxes were strewn through the living room. The walls were bare where Dad's paintings had once hung. Furniture was covered with moving blankets, and the once warm lived-in air now reeked of musty cardboard and lemon-scented cleaner. I felt like I was walking through the aftermath of a storm. Patricia hovered behind me as I walked through the rooms, the officers following at a polite distance. I didn't speak to her. I didn't need to. The house itself was telling me everything. The den was stripped. The leather chair Dad used to sit in gone. His bookcase, once full of carefully curated volumes, emptied, the shelves dusty and bare. In the kitchen, the cabinets had been reorganized to look staged and polished, but I could still see the ghost of our old life beneath the surface. The chipped mug with the faded university logo had been replaced by a set of gleaming white cups that didn't belong. The window over the sink still had the tiny scratch I made when I was 7, trying to open it with a spoon when it jammed. Dad never fixed it. In the hallway, the framed photo of our last trip to Lake Michigan was missing from the wall. Where is it? I asked. Patricia feigned innocence. What photo? The lake trip. The one from 2 summers ago. Must have gotten packed accidentally, she said, her voice too quick, too smooth. I'll look for it. You don't need to, I replied. I already know you sold it. She stiffened but didn't deny it. In the attic, I found boxes that had been labeled Goodwill. I opened one and froze. Inside were my childhood photo albums. Beneath them, tucked inside a pillowcase, was my grandmother's jewelry box. The one Patricia had claimed was lost. Inside, still nestled in the velvet-lined compartments, were my mother's wedding ring and the delicate pearl earrings my grandma wore every Christmas. Sarah, I called, voice tight. She stepped into the attic, took one look, and pulled out her phone. She photographed everything, every angle, every label, every item. Patricia stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her face set in a mask of false calm. I was going to return those, she said weakly. Hidden in a Goodwill box. In the attic. After you told me they were lost. I didn't know, she snapped. I had movers going through everything. I was distracted. Spare me, I said, turning away. Downstairs, Helen arrived. Helen was the inventory specialist Marcus had hired. She carried a clipboard and a digital scanner. Her glasses perched perfectly on the bridge of her nose. She greeted me politely, then got straight to work. Each room was carefully documented. Every item photographed. Every piece of furniture logged and matched to the list Dad had created before he died. Patricia trailed behind her like a shadow, trying to argue over each designation. That sofa's mine, she insisted. I picked it out myself. Do you have a receipt showing it was purchased with your personal funds? Helen asked, not looking up. Patricia faltered. No, but I had access to the accounts. Joint marital accounts belonging to Robert Mitchell, Helen clarified. Patricia didn't answer. In the dining room, Helen marked the antique table as remaining property. This was inherited, she said. Documented in the addendum. That's theft, Patricia hissed. That's the legal agreement your husband signed before his death, Helen replied evenly. One by one, Patricia's claims fell apart. By mid-afternoon, most of her personal belongings were packed. The only things she was allowed to take were clothes, cosmetics, a few pieces of jewelry clearly purchased after the marriage, and one suitcase of keepsakes verified as hers from before she met my father. Everything else belonged to me. Every stolen painting. Every gifted item. Every heirloom she had tried to erase. They were mine again. As the movers loaded the last of her things into the truck, Patricia stood on the front porch and looked back at the house. Her face had softened. I did love him, she said quietly. In my own way. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. She walked down the steps, heels clicking on the pavement, and climbed into her car without another word. I watched her drive away. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, final. I turned and stepped back inside the house. Everything felt still. Unfamiliar. Like it was waiting for breath to return. I walked through each room slowly. Past the marks on the kitchen wall where Dad had measured my height. Past the scuffed floor where I dropped a snow globe when I was 9. Past the hallway mirror where Dad used to fix his tie before work, even after he retired. It was all still here. Under the damage. Under the lies. Under her. Sarah stood beside me, quiet. You got it back, she whispered. I nodded. But the truth was, this wasn't victory. Not yet. This was the beginning of something harder. Because now I had to put it all back together. And not everything could be replaced. It was a week after Patricia left when I finally allowed myself to sit on the porch swing. The same swing Dad and I had fixed 3 summers ago after one of the chains gave out. He insisted we do it together, even though I could have called a handyman. He said it wasn't about fixing it, it was about doing something with our hands, something real. The porch felt different now. Quieter. Maybe lonelier. The sunlight hit the same slant across the wood planks as it had when I was a teenager. The swing still groaned when it moved. But now the silence around it felt heavier, more permanent. I had spent the last 6 days knee-deep in cleaning, sorting, and reclaiming. Every drawer I opened was a memory. Every closet held something I didn't realize had been taken or hidden. Helen's inventory list had been invaluable, matching every lost piece to a photograph, every empty shelf to a name. Marcus had already filed the first claim against Patricia for the illegally sold heirlooms. But today I wasn't thinking about court filings. I was thinking about what it meant to truly restore something. I went into the attic that afternoon to clean out the last of the storage. I had avoided it the first few days. Too many cobwebs, too many ghosts. The smell of old paper and cedar was still thick in the air. Boxes were stacked in uneven piles, some half-opened, others still sealed with masking tape from decades ago. I pulled out a box labeled Holiday Decor and found instead a stack of notebooks, my dad's handwriting across the covers. Budgets, sketches for furniture he never built. Half-finished letters he never sent. A lifetime of plans that now lived only in ink. And then I noticed the loose board. It was near the chimney. Barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. But something about the way the light hit the wood made it stand out. I leaned down, pried it up, and saw a small fireproof box tucked beneath the floor. My breath caught. I reached for it, hands trembling, and carefully opened the latches. Inside was a bundle wrapped in a faded handkerchief. I unfolded it one layer at a time. At the center there it was. My mother's wedding band and engagement ring. A small velvet bag containing Grandma's brooch. And beneath that, a USB drive. It had a white label written in my father's handwriting. For Claire. I sat down cross-legged right there in the dust of the attic floor, clutching the tiny object like it was the last warm thing left in the world. I didn't plug it in until hours later. I waited until sunset, when the house was glowing with orange light and the wind outside started to hum through the window screens. I sat in the kitchen with my laptop, the same kitchen where Dad used to sit with his coffee and crossword puzzles every Sunday morning. I took a deep breath and inserted the USB. The folder opened instantly. Inside were dozens of subfolders, labeled birthdays, holidays, family trips. I clicked one and watched photos scroll across the screen. Dad and I fishing, laughing at Thanksgiving, putting up Christmas lights on the roof while snow dusted our jackets. And then I saw the file marked message.mp4. My finger hovered over the trackpad. Clicked it. The video opened with a slight shake, like he had set the camera on a desk. He looked thinner, pale. The gray in his hair was more pronounced. But his eyes were still steady, clear, sharp. "Hi, kiddo," he said, smiling gently. "If you're watching this, it means you found the box. And that means I'm not around to explain it all in person." I leaned forward, heart hammering. "I know this is probably the hardest thing you've ever had to do. Losing me. Losing the rhythm we built together. And I hate that I'm not there to walk you through it. But I needed you to know that I saw what was happening." He paused. Followed. "Monica. She wasn't who she pretended to be. I let myself believe otherwise because for a while, I wanted to feel like life had given me one more chance. But when I got sick, the mask came off. And Claire, you were the one who stayed. Not because you had to. Because you loved me." I covered my mouth, trying to breathe through the burn rising in my throat. I couldn't stop her from trying to take everything. But I could make sure she didn't succeed. That house. It was never about the building. It was about the memories we made inside it. The history we lived together. The laughter in the walls, the stories carved into the floorboards. His voice cracked then. Just a little. "So I gave it to you. Quietly. Because I knew if she found out she'd fight. She'd spin lies. She'd make you doubt yourself. And you don't deserve that. You've never deserved that." He smiled, soft and tired. "You're stronger than you think, Claire. You always were. And this house is yours now. Not because of some paperwork, but because you understand it. Because you carry the heart of it in you. Don't ever let anyone take that from you. Rebuild it. Love it. Fill it with new memories. That's all I ever wanted." The video ended with silence. Just him looking into the camera, as if trying to hold on for one more second. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty screen. Not crying. Not anymore. The next day, I walked into Dad's old workshop. It had been gutted. The tools sold off. The pegboards bare. But I knew what needed to be done. I started with the cabinets, repairing what could be saved, pulling splinters from the wood, sanding the rust off old hinges. Every time I found something missing, I took a photo and sent it to Marcus. He was building the legal case for restitution. But I was rebuilding something else, something older than paperwork. The house started to feel different by the end of that week. I invited Sarah over for dinner. Just simple pasta, shared at the kitchen table under the humming light fixture we'd replaced that morning. "This place is already coming back to life," she said, smiling. "I don't want to recreate it exactly," I told her. "But I want it to feel like home again." And it did. Slowly, quietly, like breath returning to lungs after too long underwater. I went out and bought second-hand versions of Dad's favorite books. A new armchair. Not quite the same as the one she sold, but close enough to make me smile. I planted Grandma's daisies in the garden bed near the porch. And every evening I sat on the swing with a cup of tea, listening to the wind. This house had been stolen, then taken back. And now, it was mine again, not just in name, in soul. The morning Marcus called with news of the lawsuit, I was in the garage, halfway through restoring Dad's workbench. The surface had been scratched and weathered by time, but I wanted to bring it back to life, the way he would have done. His initials were still carved into the edge from a summer long ago, the way a child might brand their name into a tree just to say I was here. My fingertips traced over the grooves as the phone rang beside me. "It's official," Marcus said. "Patricia has been served." I didn't stop sanding. "How did she take it?" "Her attorney responded within the hour. She intends to settle." Quietly. I wiped my brow and leaned back against the garage door. The scent of sawdust filled the air, sharp and clean. "How much are we talking?" "Full restitution for the value of all items she sold or damaged without permission. Based on the inventory list and receipts, it's over $120,000. Plus penalties." I felt nothing at first. Just silence in my bones. Then, slowly, a cold satisfaction. "Does she know we found everything?" "She knows now." Her attorney didn't argue. Just asked if we'd be open to a payment plan. I laughed, short and bitter. She had no problem cashing out when she thought no one would stop her. Now she wants a payment plan. "We'll reject it," Marcus said. "You'll get everything. And soon." The Bradfords also reached a settlement. Their attorney contacted me separately, not for confrontation but for thanks. Thomas and Emily had recovered their earnest money, moving expenses, even damages for emotional stress. They moved into another home on the other side of town. Emily sent a short email after it was finalized. "Your father must have been an extraordinary man. It shows in how thoroughly he protected you." I sat with that line longer than I expected. 'Cause she was right. He had protected me not just in life, but in the details, the documents, the foresight. He had prepared every angle, predicted every betrayal, left me not with confusion but with a blueprint. And now I was following it. The house continued to change. Not into something new, but into something familiar. I replaced the cheap rugs Patricia had laid out with the old wool runners we'd stored in the attic. I brought back the framed black and white photo of my grandparents' wedding day and hung it in the entryway. I repainted the dining room with the warm sage green my dad loved, the color we'd picked out together the summer before he got sick. Every time I uncovered something that had been stolen, erased, or cheapened, I fought to bring it back. Not because I was sentimental, but because I was reclaiming the story. 2 weeks after the lawsuit settled, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Blair, you got what you wanted. Hope you're happy. What you don't understand is that this was never just about money. He was the only person who ever made me feel important. And you took that away. Patricia." I stared at the page, then folded it back into the envelope and placed it in a drawer I didn't plan to open again. Patricia had always confused control for love, possession for connection. But I wasn't going to waste my peace trying to explain the difference. She had her piece of the will, the investments Dad left for her, the accounts and the retirement savings. He hadn't abandoned her entirely. He had just drawn a line and told her she couldn't cross it. This house, this life, that was the line. A month later, I made a discovery that changed everything again. I was cleaning out the basement, organizing old shelves, when I came across a dusty box marked archive. Inside were blueprints, original layouts of the house from when it was built in 1919. Tucked between them was a faded envelope labeled loan paperwork. But when I opened it, I didn't find financial documents. Found a letter, written by my grandfather, dated June 1971. To my son Robert. "You've taken good care of this house. Better than I ever could have hoped. I'm proud of you. Inside these walls is everything I ever loved. Your mother, your childhood, your future. Pass it on carefully. Only to someone who knows the value of what can't be bought." I sat on the basement floor, holding that letter, my hands trembling. 3 generations, all trying to protect the same heartbeat. This house wasn't valuable because of where it stood or what it could sell for. It was valuable because it held us together. Cross time, cross loss. Patricia would never understand that. But I did. And maybe one day someone after me would too. On the porch swing that evening, Sarah brought out 2 glasses of iced tea and sat beside me. "You look lighter," she said, nudging my shoulder. "I feel it," I admitted. "So what's next?" I looked out at the yard, at the way the late summer light filtered through the trees. Maybe I'll turn the upstairs room into an art studio, or open the den for community meetings again. Dad always wanted this place to be full of people. It will be, she said. It already is. I smiled, the wind brushing against my face. She thought she could sell the house like it was just another asset. But she never checked who really owned it, Sarah finished. We sat in silence for a long time, the swing creaking gently beneath us. And for the first time in months, I felt the house exhale, like it had been holding its breath, waiting for this, for me. I didn't realize how hollow the house had felt until it wasn't anymore. Little things changed it. Not grand renovations, not expensive decor, just life. I started keeping the kitchen window open in the mornings, the way Dad always did. The breeze would carry in the scent of the garden, now blooming again with daisies and rosemary. Sometimes I'd hear children laughing down the block or a neighbor calling their dog, and it reminded me of simpler times, before sickness, before lawyers, before betrayal wore a familiar face. I'd started cooking again, not because I had to, but because it felt like another thread connecting me back to him. I found his old recipe notebook wedged between cookbooks in the pantry. Handwritten notes, coffee stains, even a scribbled "too much garlic, Claire" on one of the pages. I laughed when I saw it, the sound surprising me in its softness. Each room took on a new rhythm. The den, once stripped of everything meaningful, was now my evening retreat. I filled the shelves with copies of Dad's favorite books, some salvaged, others replaced. A new armchair sat near the window, with a soft blanket draped over it like the one he used. I couldn't bring back what was lost, but I could reimagine what could be made again. The upstairs bedroom, the one Patricia had turned into her personal spa room, became something else entirely. I painted the walls pale blue. I installed new lighting, softer and warmer. I set up a desk near the window with my laptop, some sketchbooks, and a jar of pens. It became a space to create, to write, to breathe. But even with all that, something still didn't feel complete. Not yet. One Sunday afternoon, while going through a box labeled "Garage Miscellaneous," I found an old photo album tucked beneath a broken power drill and a tangle of extension cords. The binding was cracked, and a faint smell of oil clung to the pages, but the photographs inside were undamaged. They were from before Patricia, before college, before everything turned sideways. Me and Dad fishing at Lake Michigan. Me and Dad painting the porch railing in mismatched overalls. Me and Dad standing in front of the newly finished treehouse, both of us grinning with paint still smudged on our cheeks. I pressed my palm to the page. Hit me then. This wasn't just about restoring the house. This was about anchoring myself to the person I used to be, before I spent months learning how to outmaneuver someone I once called family. Before legal jargon and property rights became my daily language. Before the betrayal. I had lost more than just the house in all of this. I had nearly lost myself. But now, slowly, I was piecing her back together. One photo. One drawer. One heartbeat at a time. Marcus called midweek to let me know the final court filings were complete. Patricia had agreed to pay the restitution in full within 30 days. She'd also signed a document legally forfeiting any right to contest the property transfer again. Ever. This closes the case entirely, he said. You're protected. Permanently. And the heirlooms she sold. We're pursuing the auction houses directly. Some pieces have already been located. I leaned back in my desk chair, staring out the window at the elm tree in the front yard. Thank you, Marcus. Don't thank me. Thank your dad. He did all the hard thinking. Smiled. He always did. 2 weeks later, a small package arrived. Inside was a carved wooden box, slightly chipped at the corners. One of Dad's old friends had found it in a resale shop 2 towns over and recognized the initials on the bottom, Arch. It was the box Dad used to keep on his nightstand. It held nothing of value to anyone else. Just little notes. Matchbooks from restaurants we'd visited together. The kind of things that mean nothing unless they belong to you. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph, folded gently in half. Me at age 6, curled into Dad's lap on the porch swing, both of us reading the same book. His hand resting over mine on the page. I had no memory of the photo being taken, but I remembered the moment. That night I hosted dinner. Nothing fancy. Just pasta, wine, and a few friends from the neighborhood. Sarah came early to help set the table, lighting candles and playing soft music through the speakers Dad once wired himself. The house felt alive. Not staged. Not broken. Alive. People laughed. They lingered in the hallways, admiring the photos. They asked about the treehouse, about the flowers in the backyard. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was walking through a memory. I was standing in something new. Something I had built from the wreckage. When the last guest left and the lights dimmed, I stood in the center of the living room and listened. To the quiet. To the creak of the old floors. To the ghost of Dad's laughter still tucked between the walls. I wasn't just rebuilding a house. I was reclaiming a legacy. One that never really left me. I just had to fight to remember. A month passed. Then another. And gradually, the house on Elmwood Street began to breathe differently. It no longer echoed with absence. No longer felt like I was stepping into a space that had been violated and emptied. It began to feel like home again. Not the kind of home you rent or inherit on paper. But the kind that holds you when your knees give out. The kind that listens when you're too tired to speak. I had finished restoring Dad's workshop in the garage. The pegboard was full again. Not with the original tools, most of which had been sold off in Patricia's whirlwind cleanout, but with carefully selected replacements. Each one hung exactly where Dad used to keep his. I had even found his old red stool, left behind in the basement with a broken leg, and fixed it myself. Every time I walked into that garage I felt like he was still there. Not as a ghost, but as a guide. The garden had also come back to life. I'd planted rows of wildflowers along the fence line. Daisies, snapdragons, lavender. The same varieties my grandmother used to grow. It was slow work. Digging, planting, watering each morning before the sun rose too high. But it was healing. I remember standing in the soil one morning, holding the hose, when I suddenly realized I was smiling. Not because of anything big. Just the way the light hit the petals. The sound of a bee drifting lazily past my ear. Peace was a quiet thing. And for the first time in over a year, it had returned to me. But not everything could be repaired. Some things Patricia took could never be replaced. Like the oil portrait of my mother that used to hang in the upstairs hallway. Dad had commissioned it after she left us. It wasn't about grief. It was about honoring her role in my early life, even if it ended in distance. When I asked Patricia where it went, she claimed ignorance. Probably thrown out, she said flatly. It wasn't labeled. That one stung more than most. Not because I still clung to the fantasy of my mother, but because Dad had loved that portrait. He said it reminded him of where we came from, and where we were going. I filed it away as another loss. Not to be recovered, just to be remembered. Marcus called on a rainy Wednesday with a final update. She's officially left the state, he said. Her new address is in Naples, Florida. Of course, I muttered, pouring tea into a chipped ceramic mug. She used the remaining funds from her inheritance to buy a 2-bedroom condo on the coast. The rest is gone. Did she pay off the settlement? In full. Wire transfer cleared last week. And the final items. 3 recovered, 2 untraceable. We'll issue the insurance claim on those next. I stood in the kitchen, looking out the window at the rain dripping down the glass. She was gone. Really gone. And not coming back. Thank you, Marcus. You don't owe me thanks, he said gently. This was your father's plan. I just followed it. Still, I whispered. You helped me bring it home. That weekend, I hosted a memorial. Not for Dad's passing, we'd already done that. This was something else. This was about honoring what had survived. I invited his oldest friends. A few neighbors who remembered the house before it was Patricia's trophy. Sarah helped me cook. We made all Dad's favorites: rosemary chicken, roasted vegetables, pecan pie with a crumbly crust he always botched but insisted was perfect. We lit candles in the den. Played his jazz records on the turntable I found buried under a tarp in the attic. I read his letter out loud. The one he'd left me with the deed. Be wise. Be patient. Don't let her see you coming. Let her fall into her own trap. They all applauded when I finished reading. Not because it was eloquent, but because it was real. And it had worked. He had trusted me with something fragile. And I had protected it. The following morning, I opened the windows and let the spring breeze drift through the house. I walked room to room, barefoot on the old floors. In the living room, I paused beside the wall where Dad used to measure my height. The pencil marks had been scrubbed off during Patricia's redecorating frenzy, but I could still see the faint impressions in the wood. I picked up a pencil and added a new one. My current height. My age scribbled beside it. It wasn't for anyone else. Just a message to the house itself. We're still here. In the upstairs hallway, I hung a new photo. One of me and Dad on the back porch, arms around each other, laughing about something neither of us could remember. The hallway felt complete again. Kept walking. Through the kitchen, where the kettle had just begun to whistle. Through the study, where the scent of old paper still lingered. Into the backyard, where the wind made the chimes sing their crooked song. And finally, I sat on the porch swing with my tea in hand. The wood groaned beneath me, same as it always had. A bluebird landed on the railing nearby and chirped once, then flew off. The sky was soft with clouds. The house was quiet, but not silent, because the walls remembered. And so did I. I had thought the worst was behind me. But grief has a strange way of lingering. It doesn't shout, just waits. In the quiet hours. In the half-folded laundry. In the space beside you at the dinner table. Some days I would walk through the house and swear I'd hear his footsteps behind me. Not in a haunting way, just a presence. A rhythm. Like he was still checking the doors at night or making sure the lights were off in the garage. The court filings were done. Patricia was gone. But the story still felt incomplete. And then, one evening while organizing old documents in the basement, I found something I hadn't seen before. Small flat box. It was wrapped in brown paper, tied with a fraying red ribbon. The label said nothing but "Claire. When you're ready." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a leather-bound journal. The kind my dad used to carry when he traveled for work. I flipped it open to the first page. August 12th. Claire starts college today. She didn't see me watching from the car. Her backpack was too heavy. She didn't let me help. She's stronger than she thinks. Kept turning the pages. Each one was a letter. Not sent. Not shared. Just written. December 24th. She made the pie without me this year. Didn't even ask for help. It was better than mine. Don't tell her that. March 3rd. She called from her apartment. Said she didn't need anything. I sent her groceries anyway. She yelled, then laughed. She always laughs when she's loved. Page after page. Years of thoughts he'd kept to himself. Quiet pride. Small worries. Memories only he held on to. Till now. November 2nd. Met someone today. Monica. She's beautiful. Not sure if she likes me or the house. Claire hasn't met her yet. She'll see clearer than I can. Always does. May 17th. Claire and Monica don't get along. I tell myself they'll warm to each other. But I know my daughter. She doesn't mistrust without reason. I read for hours. Tears falling silently one by one. This wasn't just a journal. This was a father's love story. Written in real time. No edits. No performance. Just honesty. Raw and deep. The last entry was dated 6 weeks before he died. It's almost time. I see it in Claire's eyes. The knowing. The sorrow she's trying to protect me from. I'm scared she'll break when I'm gone. But she won't. She never really breaks. She bends. And then rebuilds. I left her the house. Didn't tell Monica. Didn't tell anyone. I just hope Claire understands. This was never about the wood. Or the bricks. It was about memory. About keeping something sacred alive. If she's reading this, then she already knows. I trust her. With all of it. I closed the journal and held it against my chest. Not crying now. Not exactly. It was full. So full I could hardly breathe. I decided then to do something I hadn't done since he passed. I invited people back in. Not just Sarah. Not just old friends. But strangers. Families in the neighborhood. The teacher from down the street. The elderly woman who walked past our house every morning with her cane and her chihuahua. I turned the den into a community room. Just like Dad always wanted. Once a month I hosted book readings and writing nights. People came. First a few. Then a dozen. Then more. And every time I opened that front door to someone new, I felt like I was opening a new chapter in the story he left behind. There was one moment late in the spring that sealed it for me. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, stood by the kitchen wall where the old height markings used to be. She ran her fingers along the smooth wood and looked up at me. "What was here?" she asked. I knelt beside her. "Memories," I said softly. "My dad used to mark how tall I was every year. Right here." She nodded, serious and wide-eyed. "Can you mark mine?" Her mother smiled from the other room, watching. I picked up a pencil and made a small line on the wood, just above her head, wrote her name beside it. She beamed. And in that instant I knew. This house had come full circle. Not through revenge. Not through anger. But through love. Through the small, brave act of letting the pain become something beautiful. Later that night, when the house was quiet again, I walked out to the porch swing. The air was cool. The stars were faint. And I whispered, almost to myself, "We're doing it, Dad. We're really doing it." The swing creaked. The wind stirred the curtains behind me. And inside those walls the house kept listening. Kept remembering. Kept holding us all. Summer melted into early fall. The air grew sharper, and the trees along Elmwood Street began to whisper again. Leaves curling, colors deepening, branches trembling in the hush of each morning. I found myself rising earlier than usual. Not because of chores. Not because I needed to. But because I wanted to. The quiet before sunrise became sacred to me. I would sit at the kitchen table with a cup of tea in Dad's old mug, the one Patricia had thrown into a donation pile and I had rescued from the bottom of a storage bin. The crack along its handle hadn't grown. Maybe it was just waiting, like the rest of the house, for things to feel right again. I'd watch the sky change colors and let the stillness settle over me. Those moments reminded me that healing didn't come with grand gestures. Came in the spaces no one else sees. The lawsuit faded into history. The insurance paid out for the unrecovered heirlooms. The final accounting arrived in a plain manila envelope, with a note from Marcus that simply read, "It's done." I didn't open it for 3 days. Not because I feared what was inside, but because, in a way, that envelope represented the last tether to Patricia. Once it was opened, she was no longer a shadow lurking in the corner of the story. She was over. So when I finally opened it, I read every line slowly, item by item, statement by statement. Every antique she'd tried to sell. Every personal belonging she'd claimed as her own. Every fixture, every rug, every dollar accounted for. It was all there. A map of everything she tried to take. And everything she lost instead. I placed the file in the cabinet beside Dad's documents. Not with bitterness. With finality. Because the house was no longer something I had to protect. It was something I could live in again. There were nights I still thought about her. Not with anger. With bewilderment. How could someone walk through these rooms, sleep under this roof, and not feel the weight of what it meant? How could she strip the walls of their memories, sell the shelves bare, and still not see that what made the house valuable had nothing to do with the price per square foot? She had tried to take it all. But she'd only ever touched the surface. She never owned the foundation. She couldn't. Because she didn't understand it. And now she never would. I made one last trip to the attic in mid-September. I'd avoided it since discovering Dad's journal. I wasn't sure what else it could hold. But something told me to go back to check one more time. It was dusk. The light came in soft, low through the round window that faced the backyard. I stepped carefully across the creaking boards and knelt near the chimney wall, where I'd found the fireproof box weeks before. And that's when I noticed a gap between the wall panels. It wasn't visible unless you were kneeling. I reached in and pulled. A small envelope slipped out, thick and sealed with wax. My name again. But this time it wasn't in Dad's handwriting. It was Mom's. The handwriting was familiar in a forgotten way. Loopy, elegant, slanted just slightly to the right. I hadn't seen it in years. My breath caught. Opened it. Inside was a letter. Short. Gentle. Blair. I know I left you too early. And I know I didn't deserve your forgiveness for a long time. But I loved you. I always loved you. Your father. He gave me this letter back once I chose to leave. He said maybe one day you'd need it. Maybe one day it would mean something. And if you're reading it now, then maybe that day has come. Remember this. You were never unloved. You were never forgotten. Not by me. And never by him. I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. Not because it solved anything, but because it reminded me that even the most broken pieces of the past could still shine, if you looked at them in the right light. A few weeks later, I opened the house. Officially. Not as a museum. Not as a monument. But as a space for stories. I called it the Harper House Project. 1 weekend a month people came to share. Stories of their own. Things they'd lost. Things they were rebuilding. Kids came too. They sat in the treehouse. Read books on the porch swing. Made new marks on the kitchen wall. Let them. Because that's what a legacy is. Not something you keep locked away in a safe. But something you give. Again and again. Until it lives in someone else's hands. I still miss him. Every day. And maybe I always will. But missing him no longer feels like a wound. Feels like a song. Quiet. Unshakable. Still playing somewhere in the background of everything I do. The house holds it too. Sometimes when the wind rushes through the hallway, I swear it hums. Sometimes when I open the workshop, I smell his cologne. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see his eyes. And I know without question that I kept my promise. I protected what he loved. I guarded what mattered. I brought it back from the edge of ruin. And more than anything, I made sure she would never ever forget that she sold a house she never truly owned. Because the heart of it, the soul, the history, that belonged to me, and always would.